Hey guys, welcome back to Kensaw Mountain National Battlefield Park. Ranger James here. I'm one of the interpretive rangers here at the park. Today we're going to be doing something really special. April is Conservation Month, and so what better way to think about conservation than to go out into the wilderness. So I'm going to take you guys along one of our lesser used trails, but one of our, to me, one of our most beautiful trails that we have. And this is the environmental loop. This is a 1.33 mile loop that starts at the picnic area just opposite of the parking lot from the visitor center. It's really easy, it's really child friendly. There's a ton of stuff to see. We're not going to be able to cover everything, but we're going to try to do our best. So what you see behind me is we've got some of the maps. This is the map of the environmental trail itself. We're down here at the bottom where it says you are here, and then it shows some of the different stops that are covered along this trail. And then behind me is going to be another map. And this is going to show you where the environmental trail is compared to the rest of the park. And then of course we have the trailhead. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Follow me. Alright guys, we are just inside the environmental trail. Less than 25 yards into the trail itself, but we have our very first stop. And this one is really important. It's kind of interesting to me. I'm surrounded by trees. There's trees all over the place, but we're going to talk about one specifically, and that's the one right behind me. And this is a loblolly pine. Now, there are of course two different kinds of trees that you might find: broadleaf and conifers. And pine trees are conifers. They're evergreens. And the cool thing about a pine tree is this really thick bark that you'll find on it. And this is nature's way of trying to make this as fireproof as possible. So, if there's ever a fire that sweeps down through here, this thick bark is going to protect the inner tree from those flames. Also, you may notice as you're wandering through the park and exploring the park yourself that we do have a lot of pine trees that are down. Those are because of a couple of factors. One is a couple of years ago there was a blight of beetles that came through and bored into those pine trees, weakening them. And then coupling that with some of the drought conditions that we've had over the last couple of summers, it really weakened those trees and they began to fall down. I don't know if you guys remember, but just about 2 months ago we had a really bad storm that came through, and I think there might have been even a microburst all along the trail here, along the 24 gun trail, and it knocked a bunch of the trees down. We are working on it though. Of course, part of conservation is just allowing nature's the wheel of nature to spin on its own, right? So oftentimes these trees, unless they're falling over a trail, will leave them to their own devices because they then become homes and they become integral to the ecosystem of the park. So we're going to continue on down the trail. Follow me.
This picture shows Ranger James headed down the trail with trees on either side. This picture shows the trail splitting off into two different sections with the sign and arrow pointing to the right. Here we see the trail continuing in between two large pine trees.
Hey guys, welcome back. So we are at one of our first historical markers on the trail. This one is of special importance to everybody that likes to hang out at the visitor center. This is of the 66 Illinois, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. What you'll find here is a blue sign with white lettering, and this is going to give you some information about the different troops that were here. Regimental structures on that, the command structures of the troops. What you'll find throughout the park is blue signs, and those are for, you guessed it, Union troops. And then we have gray signs, and guess what those are for? Confederate troops. Oftentimes we get the question, how come there's so many Confederate signs going up to the top of the mountain? And the reason being is, well, that's where the Confederates were. This is where the Union boys were at. So the 66 Illinois, they were actually a sharpshooter regiment. They had a really cool kind of rifle known as the Henry Repeater at the time. It was the rifle that won the West. And this was a gun that could shoot up to 14 rounds without having to be reloaded. The Confederates called that the gun that could be loaded up on Sunday and shot all week long. And their role in the battle is of particular importance. Of course, even though we're out here to enjoy some of the natural beauty, and there's a lot of people that like to come out here and recreate, hopefully responsibly, first and foremost, this is a battlefield park. So our first mission, first and foremost, is to preserve and protect and interpret the history that's here. This is the whole reason why we're here, is because of the battle that was fought here. And what these guys did is they were part of a diversionary attack against the Confederate line, against the very top of the Confederate line, up against the trenches at the foot of Kensaw Mountain. And they came charging the length of 4 football fields out in the open, up against the foot of the mountain, against the 1st Alabama, who were in their trenches, in their foxholes out front. And in every case, as with all the other fights that had happened here, every other assault that happened during the Battle of Kensaw Mountain on June 27, 1864, this attack was turned aside. The fighting here was especially brutal. These guys thought that this was their battle. They were determined to try and take Kensaw Mountain all the way up to the top. They actually got to those foxholes right in front of the main Confederate line, and in some cases they jumped into the foxholes, and the fighting broke down to hand-to-hand combat. It was really nasty stuff. But the Union troops were turned away. Many companies of the 66th Illinois, the 64th Illinois, and a couple of the other regiments that were involved in that attack were captured and sent down to Andersonville prison. So if any of you guys are ever hanging out around the visitor center, or you hang out in front of the big open field in front of the visitor center, that's that part of the battlefield. That's what happened here. But we're going to move on a little over here, because we have something else that's really interesting to talk about. And what we're going to talk about over here is poison ivy. So, as you're wandering through the park, you may see something like this here. This is a big fuzzy vine. And a lot of people don't understand that that's actually poison ivy. And there's a story that comes back to Kensaw Mountain. As you can see, it's about a finger's length in width, and it's really, really hairy coming up and down the tree there. There's a story about poison ivy that can be traced back to Kensaw Mountain. It involves a soldier. He was an officer. His name was Benjamin Harrison. And while he was here at Kensaw Mountain, he was involved in trying to dig some of the trenches in and around the mountain. He was a Union soldier. And he got poison ivy so bad that he had to wear gloves for the rest of his life because of the scarring that it caused. He couldn't take part in the battle that happened here because his hand, he was just out of action during the battle that was here. And he would continue to wear gloves for the rest of his life, even all the way up until he became President of the United States later on in life. But we're going to continue on, so if you would just please follow me down the trail.
Here is a poison ivy vine creeping up the tree. Ranger James continuing down the trail, with trees on either side. Trail marker marking the quarter-mile mark into the trail. 2 large trees straddling the road with blue sky above. The trail continuing on past one of our many park benches along the trail.
Hey guys, back with another short video. This is we're continuing along our walk here on our environmental hike. What you'll see next to me is another one of our awesome troop signs. This one for the 64th Illinois. They were one of the regiments that made the charge up against Kensaw Mountain there near the visitor center. But that's not what we're going to be talking about today. What we're actually going to be talking about is a really awesome, and for me it's personally why I love to be on this trail more than a lot of the others that we have throughout the park, is when you get to this section of the trail, you really begin to notice that all of the traffic on Stylesboro Road, which is just right to my front, begins to fade away. And step by step, you find yourself leaving the human footprint behind, and you get deeper and deeper into what I would say the environmental portion of our environmental trail. You can definitely feel sort of nature taking over when you get to this section. As we continue on, the road goes ever on and on. You'll notice that a little bit better as we keep on going. Before it eventually the trail will turn again back towards the visitor center, and we'll pick up a little bit more of that human activity. But I just wanted to note that for you guys. If you ever come out and hike this trail, be aware of what you're listening, what you're seeing, what you're smelling, all of your senses, using them as you're hiking, and really notice things like that, because it's pretty incredible. So come on down.
Trail continuing on through the trees. Here a creek runs along the trail. Ranger James looks majestically towards the creek. The trail continues with boulders strewn along either side.
Hey guys, back again with our environmental trail hike. What you'll see behind me is Kensaw Mountain. Well, it used to be Kensaw Mountain. So we're in the boulder field, which is on one side of the environmental trail. And it's a boulder field because we're at the very foot of the mountain. You can kind of see it rising up behind me through the trees. And directly behind me you can see a couple of large stones. And this is once part of the mountain that over thousands of years with erosion have tumbled off the mountain and come to settle here in this boulder field. Now, the story of Kensaw Mountain is really interesting. Believe it or not, once upon a time, Kensaw Mountain was attached to the rest of the Appalachian chain of mountains. And story goes, they were taller than the Rocky Mountains are today. But over time, over millions of years, those mountains have begun to kind of shrink, level out, and there's hills surrounding them now where there used to be peaks. And Kensaw Mountain is no exception to that. We're what's known as a Monongahela, which is a Native American derived term, which means lonely mountain, although we weren't always lonely. What this means is that we are a solitary peak that's usually not surrounded by much of anything. Even though Kensaw Mountain technically has 3 peaks, if you count the spur of Pigeon Hill, we are considered one mountain here. Another monadnock that you might find in the great metro Atlanta area is going to be Stone Mountain, which formed a little bit differently, whereas this was part of tectonic shifts that merged together and made the mountain chain as we know it today as the Appalachian Mountains. Stone Mountain actually was more of a bursting of bubble of magma underneath the earth that came up and then dried to make it kind of look like a little bit of a zit almost, and that's kind of what it is. Different kinds of rock that you'll find, but there's several other monadnocks in the greater Atlanta area, and homework, I'd like you guys to research and see which ones they are and which ones you might be able to go and explore, because they all offer something different to the ecosystem and the greater natural area that surrounds Atlanta. So, without further ado, the trail goes ever on, and we're going to continue on.
The trail continues with the forest pressing in on the left side. Dense patch of trees with blue sky overhead. The trail continuing on with trees on either side.
Hey guys, Ranger James back. We have finished our environmental trail hike. We have ended where we began. It was a loop 1.33 miles through some of the most beautiful habitat that you can find here at Kensaw Mountain National Battlefield Park, and as you can tell, there's a bit more traffic over on this side of things, but we appreciate you guys coming out and viewing this video, and hopefully we'll be able to get you guys some guided hikes through this section of the trail again sometime soon. But in the meantime, check back with Facebook for some of our other programming. Our battle anniversary is coming up here in another couple months, and yeah, stay tuned. Have a good one.